The ancient watchtower stood silent against the starlit sky, its weathered stones holding centuries of vigilance. Guardsman Tarek wrapped his cloak tighter as the bitter wind howled through the mountain peaks. His eyes, heavy from the long watch, suddenly widened as a distant light flickered to life. The beacon of Amandine had been lit. Within moments, he scrambled up the tower's worn steps, his heart pounding against his chest. The signal fire must be answered. As the flames rose high into the night sky, Tarek watched in awe as one by one the beacons awakened across the mountain range, each light a desperate cry for aid in the darkness. In the golden hall of Meduseld, Theoden King sat upon his throne, his face grave as messengers brought word of Gondor's call for aid. Around him, his most trusted advisors spoke in hushed tones, while Aragorn stood silent by the great pillars, his weather-worn face reflecting the weight of the moment. The decision before them would seal the fate of thousands. As the morning sun streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows across the intricate floor patterns, Eowyn watched from the shadows, her heart burning with a warrior's spirit she dared not voice. The horns of Rohan would soon sound across the plains, but at what cost? The plains of Rohan erupted with activity as the call to arms spread like wildfire. Riders thundered across the grasslands, their horses' hooves drumming an urgent rhythm into the earth. In every village and settlement, weapons were sharpened, armor was donned, and tearful farewells were exchanged. Eomer led his Eord through the gathering crowds, the morning mist swirling around the horses' legs. Above, dark clouds gathered ominously, as if nature itself sensed the approaching storm of war. As the first raindrops fell, the sound of thousands of hooves merged with rolling thunder, and the great muster of Rohan began its journey toward destiny. Yet in the midst of this grand mobilization, few noticed the dark-winged creatures circling high above, their shrieks lost in the wind. The dank air of the mountain passage clung to Frodo's skin as he pressed forward, each step more uncertain than the last. Sam's reassuring presence behind him did little to quell the growing unease that seemed to seep from the very walls around them. Gollum, their wretched guide, scuttled ahead on all fours, his pale form barely visible in the gloom. The passage twisted endlessly, each turn revealing more darkness, more uncertainty. Strange echoes bounced off the ancient stone, carrying whispers that seemed to speak of forgotten horrors. As they ventured deeper, the air grew thicker with an unseen malice, and the weight of the ring grew heavier with each passing hour. When they finally paused to rest, Frodo noticed strange markings on the walls, ancient warnings written in a script he couldn't comprehend, yet somehow understood in his bones. Their path split into 3 identical tunnels, each disappearing into impenetrable darkness. Gollum's usual certainty faltered, his large eyes darting between the options as he muttered to himself. Sam's patience wore thin as precious hours slipped away in indecision. The air grew colder, and strange drafts carried the scent of something ancient and decaying. As they debated their course, distant drums began to echo through the passages. Whether from above or below, none could tell. Frodo's hand unconsciously clutched at his chest, the ring's weight seeming to pull him toward one particular tunnel. When a sudden screech pierced the darkness behind them, the choice was made in haste rather than wisdom. The chosen tunnel descended sharply, taking them deeper into the mountain's heart. Sam noticed it first. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, shadows moving against the natural flow of their meager light. Gollum became increasingly agitated, his usual mumblings giving way to frightened whimpers. Frodo felt the air thicken with each step until breathing became an effort. The passage opened into a vast chamber where ancient pillars rose into darkness above. Here, the shadows danced more boldly, taking shapes that vanished when directly observed. A sweet, sickly scent drifted on the air, and the sound of silk brushing against stone echoed from somewhere in the darkness ahead. When their light caught hundreds of eyes reflecting in the darkness, they realized their path had led them exactly where they feared to go. The torchlight danced across ancient stone walls as Aragorn led his small company deeper into the cursed mountain paths. The air grew thicker with each step, carrying whispers of those long departed. Behind him, Legolas's keen elven senses twitched at every shadow, while Gimli's grip tightened around his axe handle. The dead watched from their ethereal realm, their ghostly forms swirling like morning mist around the living intruders. When Aragorn finally reached the central chamber, his voice echoed with authority as he held aloft the reforged blade, its gleam cutting through the supernatural darkness. The spectral king emerged, his crown of smoke and malice hovering above empty air, and made his choice, one that would alter the fate of Middle-earth. Theoden's heart swelled as he watched the gathering of his people. From every corner of Rohan, they came, warriors young and old, bearing spears that glinted like stars in the morning light. The plains of their homeland thundered with hoofbeats as companies of riders assembled, their green and gold banners snapping in the wind. Éomer brought word of more forces arriving from the Westfold, while Éowyn's eyes burned with a hidden fire as she oversaw the preparation of supplies. Yet shadow lingered at the edges of their hope. Scouts reported growing darkness in the east, and ravens brought dire tidings from Gondor. Time was running short, and the fate of two kingdoms now rested on how swiftly they could ride. Within the 7 circles of Minas Tirith, tension mounted like a gathering storm. Gandalf's white robes flashed through the levels of the city as he moved between council chambers and battlements, his presence both reassuring and disquieting to those who saw him pass. Denethor brooded in his tower, dark thoughts festering as he clutched his secrets close. Below, in the streets, soldiers hammered at forge fires and sharpened blades, while women and children gathered supplies for the siege they all knew was coming. From the highest tower, watchers could see the growing darkness in the east, where Mordor's shadows seemed to reach out like grasping fingers. As night fell, the beacons of Gondor blazed across the mountains, their urgent message clear. War was coming, and none could say who would live to see its end. The first rays of dawn painted Minas Tirith's white walls in shades of amber, but the beauty was short-lived. Dark clouds rolled in from the east, bringing with them an unnatural twilight. Gandalf, astride Shadowfax, galloped through the city's winding streets, his white robes billowing as he called the defenders to their posts. The air grew thick with tension as drums echoed from beyond the Pelennor fields. Pippin, now in the service of the steward, watched from the citadel as thousands of torches appeared in the distance, like malevolent fireflies approaching the city. The ground trembled beneath the march of Mordor's armies, their war machines casting long shadows in the false dawn. The siege engines of Mordor proved more terrible than any had imagined. Great towers of wood and iron crawled forward like monstrous insects, while catapults hurled not just stones but the heads of fallen soldiers into the city. Denethor's madness deepened with each passing hour, his mind poisoned by visions in the Palantir. Below, Gandalf orchestrated the defense, his voice carrying hope where despair threatened to take hold. The Nazgul's screams pierced the air, sending defenders scrambling for cover. Yet in this darkest hour, horns echoed from the north. Unexpected aid had arrived. Prince Imrahil's swan knights charged forth from the city, their armor gleaming despite the gloom, buying precious time as the enemy's noose tightened. As night fell true, Grond, the great battering ram, was revealed, 100 feet of forged malice, wreathed in black flames. The Witch King himself now led the assault, his presence alone causing the bravest hearts to quail. Gandalf alone stood defiant atop the gates, staff blazing with white fire. Pippin watched in horror as Denethor, consumed by despair, led a procession to the silent street, intending an unthinkable act. The young hobbit was torn between duty to the steward and the urgent need to save Faramir from his father's madness. Below, the great gates began to splinter under Grond's relentless assault, while above, a pale light grew in the north. Dawn was approaching, but would the city survive to see it? The air hung heavy with the metallic scent of battle, as the first rays of sunlight struggled to pierce through the unnatural gloom over Minas Tirith. Gandalf stood atop the white walls, his staff gleaming faintly as he watched the endless sea of enemies below. The Witch King's presence cast a shadow of despair over the defending soldiers, their hearts growing heavier with each passing moment. But then, carried on the morning wind, came a sound that none had expected. A horn, clear and bright, echoing from the north. The wizard's eyes brightened with hope as he recognized its voice. "The horns of the north," he whispered. "The Rohirrim have come." As the morning light strengthened, Theoden led the thunderous charge of the Rohirrim across the Pelennor fields. The ground trembled beneath 6,000 hooves, and the air filled with the sound of horns and battle cries. The orcs turned to face this new threat, their previous confidence wavering. Eowyn, disguised as Dernhelm, rode with fierce determination, young Merry clutching tightly behind her. The sight of the horsemen breaking upon the enemy lines was like a great wave crashing against dark rocks, their spears gleaming like stars in the growing light. But above the chaos, a chilling screech split the air. The Witch King had taken wing. In the midst of the battle's chaos, Eowyn found herself facing her greatest challenge. The Witch King's fell beast had descended, its presence alone causing nearby horses to flee in terror. With Merry at her side, she stood her ground as others retreated. The Lord of the Nazgul mocked her with cruel words, his voice like ice in her veins. "No living man may hinder me," he proclaimed. With unwavering courage, Eowyn removed her helmet, golden hair cascading down as she declared her true identity. The air crackled with tension as they faced each other, destiny hanging by a thread. But neither the Witch King nor Eowyn noticed the small figure of Merry, moving silently through the shadows behind them.